It is basically, I also observed in banks, RMs are doing the same thing, that they are mis-selling. Many times even they accepted it, that it is not good. And by telling customer that they are giving a single premium policy, they have sold regular premium policy, and customer realized only after 1 year when the notice has come to him that he has to pay. But now thing is that, see, in any organization, whether bank or a big institution, when employee is working there, he has target. Now target has to be there because he is getting salary. Now how to justify this? Now company, is my opinion basically what I want to say. When target is given based on the salary, because when company is paying something, they have to expect something from the employee. But it should not be in that way that person has to do some mis-selling to get that much. So that HR people have to decide, or management has to decide, or the person should join the company where he knows that company is ethical. If he knows that these are the company who are unethical and they expect this only, then why to work there? So I don't know anything else other than that, because if you are saying you must be referring some company or something where it is happening. So as a consumer, I can say that he should not be missold something. But if you are referring a employee who is mis-selling because his employer asked him to do it, better he should quit that job and do something else where his conscience allows him to do some good thing. So this is the only way.
That's a very good answer indeed. But also just an empirical evidence, observation I can give you, being in the industry for some time, that the percentage of mis-selling, there are exceptions, but the percentage of mis-selling amongst the best of agents and the best of sales managers or people, and in insurance industry I'm talking about here, and this will probably apply to most financial industry, the people who do really well, they have a very low percentage of grievances. So it might sound ironical, but those who do really well and over a period of time, typically there are exceptions, I agree, and there have been some huge exceptions which have come to light, but by and large the people who do well and over a longer period of time, you'll find the customer retention high, you'll find the number of complaints lower, quality of sales higher, and in case of insurance, the persistency better. And that's data that we have actually.
Just a quick one to add. You were mentioning about the organization and the way they work and how it's not gelling with the FTF principles, right? If you see,
I would just like to say, the organization doesn't say you go and mis-sell.
Sure.
They say achieve your target.
Achieve, but then if you do this, you feel that, yeah.
Most of the organization,
So it's not.
don't mis-sell, but achieve your target.
I get you. So it is not just for you as an employee in an organization, even the practitioners here who are on their own. I would say that even for them, this is the same, and this is exactly what I was referring to when I was talking, that you are used to a way of working. I mean, for you it is salary, for example, and for them it is their earnings coming out of this practice. And they are doing their job in a particular way, maybe not fully following all of these, but if they do that, they might have a lesser chance of selling an endowment plan, for example. That is the tough decision that one has to take, and that is the difficulty in adopting this change. So that's something that gels with everybody's difficulties. So we got to find a way out. We have to do what is right for the client. That's it. And then the quick one around whistleblower policies. It's there in India as well. If your company is forcing you to do something that you believe is not right for the customer, you have the right to blow the whistle. And for all you know, you might get $1 million as compensation.
I think this question we face in many meetings, and I don't know whether he's talking from RM's perspective or from the advisor's perspective. If his question is, he's an advisor and RMs are forcing him because the RM has to have the target achieved, keep emotions out of your client's business. Even client's emotion also you have to segregate. You have to do like a scientific method, and because he is every day meeting you, he is your friend, he is telling to fulfill my target by selling these things, say no. Because it's your business, your trust has to build up. If the RM is missing his target, let him miss. But if that product is not suitable, don't sell. that is, you separate all the relationship, all the emotions from advising your clients. That's the only this thing I will tell. You understand the perspective of the RM and also understand the perspective of client, but if they do not match, say no. And you find a lot of more business, a lot of more other RMs will come, and you find a lot of suitable products available, which all the things can match. Thank you.
Next question. The gentleman there. This will be the second last question. We'll just take one more question after this for paucity of time, sorry.
Hi, I'm Jaideep. I have a query regarding, see, from morning we've been hearing about technology being used for tracking your client's financial status. But if you take that along with another aspect where we say that the transactional part and the advisory part should be separate. Now in India, for example, if I am an IFA, unless I transact in that, if that person doesn't transact through me, I do not even get his data. So how do I even start from such basic data if I don't get about my client, if I don't have access to it? How can I track it, whatever technology I have?
An interesting question. I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but I will add that there are some people who already build portals through which they can integrate all services with the client's permission. So if the client is, for example, using the DMAT of a particular bank, that can be integrated. If he's using a particular credit card, that can be integrated. If he's using a bank account, it can be integrated with the client's permission and knowledge. And the portal can in turn capture the data. And the advisor can then advise based on the data captured. And this is data shared by the customer, so there is no breach of regulation. You're not independently getting it from an organization by requesting. So that is something that can be done. And there is at least one or two people in my mind who are doing it. And I'm not saying everybody is doing it. You can do it to a certain extent. As far as the second aspect is concerned, where transacting and advising have to be at arm's length, that is a very logical and an internationally followed practice, which should be the case. But that doesn't mean that your transaction should not be considered for the sake of advising you. I think there is a difference between the two. The last question, please. Okay, the gentleman on the first desk. What's your name? If you can just introduce yourself.
Afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Prasad. I belong to the academic industry. I have two questions. You can answer any one of them since this is the last question, right? So one is from the investor's point of view, and one is from a professional point of view. From the investor's point of view, my question is, we are talking about trust building, we are talking about sitting down with the customer, asking them a lot of questions, answering, etc., etc., etc. That is completely fine. Now, Mr. Krishnamurthy will agree with me that in some books it has been written that a man is inherently good. So people will do good for other people. Okay, so we always assume that a person in front of us is going to do good for us. But normally what happens is, sometimes as an investor, when we trust someone, that person dupes us of crores and crores of rupees and runs away. So as an investor, how much should I trust? That is from the investor's point of view. From the professional point, question is, Mr. Mohanty said that these all 4 points which you are addressing are intangible, which is perfectly fine. Now, when we talk about client's delight, now if you think about it, client may not be completely aware of what is the maximum delight which he can achieve. For example, if you invest 100 rupees in the stock market, maximum you can get 110. 105 दे दिया तो ये बोलेगा कि मैं खुश हूँ, कुछ तो मिला. So as an advisor, how should you address, or is there any particular way of how you will quantify client's delight? So 2 questions.
Okay, so the first question is around the investor, and the second question is around managing customer delight. Okay, so I think the first question, because it was largely addressed to you.
In all fairness, it's a very valid question, because as a customer, how much do you reveal or disclose? The problem is that if you don't disclose appropriately, then you will end up getting a wrong surgery. So it's up to the client to understand what he is getting into, and it's up to us to educate the customer that in the absence of all information, what I'm going to diagnose for you can be wrong. That is the core of the whole conversation. So I completely agree with you, because a customer will always be circumspect. That is, see, because unfortunately for us in India, when you deal with financial intermediaries, and I must say, having seen this and been part of this for a while now, there is a trust deficit, clearly.